Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Defiant Takes Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and we are back to pick every single Sunday NFL game against the spread with Brison Owens and Kyle Nishida. You can find Kyle at Brison Owens 16. You can find Kyle at Kyle_Nishida. And it's 10 a.m. Eastern time on a Saturday morning, but I'll tell you what, feels earlier than that to me. How y'all doing today?
I'm doing well so far, man. You know, we've got an exciting day of college football ahead of us, and then hopefully, looking at the spread, just a lot of really good NFL games the next day. So it's gonna be a fun weekend of football.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Actually, this is probably one of the weekends I was kind of excited about the most. This is a huge college football Saturday, and then there are actually a handful of pretty good games in the NFL. A lot of desperate teams tomorrow, and you may see a lot of numbers reflecting that in how things go tomorrow. So I'm definitely excited about this weekend. This is definitely a very, very big football weekend.
I agree. Look, there's a lot of teams that are 0-2, a lot of teams that are 1-1 who don't want to get to week 3 of the season and have a losing record, because 1-2 is tough to come back from, and we all know that 0-3 is kind of the cutoff. If you go into the season 0-3, the chances of making the playoffs are about as slim as any early season indicator. So it is an interesting week to be sure. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to make some picks. We're going to throw in a couple of props here and there. Want to say what's up to our producer, Noah Ashley. Awesome to have him back. Noah, how you doing today?
Yo, what's up, guys? I'm doing well. It's been a long day for me so far, but really happy to listen to you guys. You guys keep me updated on the teams outside of the Indianapolis Colts, so I'm ready for that.
Noah's out in Europe hanging out. He's nice and chill in his afternoon time, whereas I may or may not have spent my Friday night out doing alternative activities. So
You and me both, so
at least we don't have any late night Pac-12 games going on to keep us awake, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. First off, we have the Tennessee Titans as plus 3.5 underdogs to the Cleveland Browns. They are missing some important players for the Titans. Peter Skoronski, just like last week. For the Browns, they're missing Greg Newsome and questionable James Hudson, but that's a backup tackle, so probably not the most detrimental of out or questionables. And then DeAndre Hopkins, but he's always questionable. He's most likely going to play. He's just kind of I don't really practice in the week type of guy. So Brison, what do you think? If we're looking at the Titans and the Browns, whereas the Titans, the expectations were relatively low for them coming into the season. The Browns, expectations relatively high. They lose after a big win in week 1. They lose in prime time against a division opponent in week 2. How do you foresee this going down?
I've got the Tennessee Titans covering this one in large part because I'm following the "if it's not broke, don't fix it" trend. They've been 3.5-point underdogs in both their games to start the season, and they've covered both times. So it's a good trend to follow for the Titans. They even went out and won last week against the Chargers somehow. And then a lot of it, losing Nick Chubb is a huge blow to this Browns offense. I mean, they were the leading team in the NFL in rushing. They're averaging over 200 yards a game. And losing that type of production is just a huge blow. And Ford and Hunt are going to do their best to replace it, but they're not Nick Chubb. And so going into this Titans defense, which has played very well to start the season, especially against the run, is going to make life very difficult on the Browns. And Deshaun Watson just has not looked good. He has not looked good to start the season. He's playing against a defense that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I think that defensive front is going to get to Deshaun Watson a couple times in this game, make him very uncomfortable. One of my favorite props in this game, speaking of props, is Deshaun Watson to throw an interception. It's at plus money at plus 114. He's thrown one in both games so far this season. And against this Titans defense, I can just see them forcing him to throw a ball in a window that he shouldn't throw a ball into. So I think they're going to make life very difficult on Deshaun. He doesn't have his safety blanket of that running back to back him up. And the Titans could easily be 2-0 to start the season. That's how they should be looking at this. I think they're in a good spot in this type of matchup to keep it a close game the entire time.
Yeah, I'm right in the same line of thinking as Bryson. I haven't been a big Deshaun Watson guy since he got to Cleveland. So I mean, I'm getting the Titans, who in their history with Vrabel have been a very good underdog in every single one of these opportunities. They've covered the past 2 games this season as basically a 3-point underdog. So I would take the Titans plus 3.5 here. I was actually stunned when Bryson said the over interceptions just a half at plus money. I don't see how that's a plus money thing, but yeah, I definitely take that. Deshaun's also going to throw a lot this game because while they do probably like Jerome Ford, they're gonna lean hard on Deshaun Watson's arm this game just because they don't want to run Ford into the ground. And I'm not sure what Hunt's level of capability is. So I'm seeing at 3.5 pass attempts or 30.5 pass attempts. I would definitely take the over on 30.5 pass attempts because I think he's definitely going to throw more than that. And then one other one is the Titans are still run by Derrick Henry, but they also have a guy by the name of Tajay Spears, and he's actually getting a lot of good run in spelling Derrick Henry. Right now, his rush prop is at 21.5. He's covered that both times in the 2 games they played. I definitely look at that as another player prop to keep an eye on.
You know, for them to have lost Nick Chubb in last week's game, it sucks because the NFL is better when Nick Chubb plays, right? I think we can all agree on that. Whether he's on your fantasy team or not, he's a really special player. But for the Browns, I think it means a lot. I don't know how to anticipate the flow of their offense without a guy like that in there. Jerome Ford is a good player, right? He had some explosive plays. But when you go from the start of the game to the end of the game, you need a guy in Cleveland who can carry a workload. And that's not just, making a quick burst for a first down. That's play in, play out. And I'm just not sure how I anticipate that going down. The Titans are coming off of the high of a win last week. And with plus 3.5, I don't disagree that the Browns are ultimately overall more talented, but with being given the points, I'm going to take the points. I'll take the Titans at plus 3.5. All right. Here's an interesting one. The Falcons are only plus 3 favorites against the Detroit Lions, right? Detroit had a great game week 1 against the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. But their defense got exposed a little bit in week 2. And they are talented, but maybe all of their investments in the offseason are not immediately going to translate to a good defense right off the bat. So we might see some volatility there. Falcons, on the other hand, they are a little bit less explosive, perhaps, but they do have quite a few players who can make an individual play themselves. So the 2 first-round running backs go head-to-head this week. Bryson, what do you think about the Falcons plus 3 underdogs against the Detroit Lions?
So this is going to be one of my favorite games to watch this weekend. I like a lot of both of these teams. I do have the Falcons covering. I think the Lions get the win at the end of the day because I do think that they're a better football team than Atlanta, but I think both teams have enough, especially on offense, to keep it close. I think you're going to see so much running. There's going to be a lot of running in this game because that's what the Falcons want to do. I think the Lions, who haven't leaned on the run game a ton so far this season, even with missing David Montgomery, who's on track to not be playing in this game, I think they're going to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs pretty heavily in this one to just try to match that Falcons run game as much as they can. And the run defense is the biggest weak link of this Falcons defense right now. They are 22nd so far. They've given up 120 rushing yards a game so far. So I think you're going to see a lot of the Lions and Falcons leaning on that run game, which tends to just lead itself to a closer game. I don't think there's going to be too much of a shootout. I don't think the Falcons are going to put Desmond Ridder in a situation where they need him to throw the ball 30 times. I think the Lions will want to try and establish some kind of run game as the season goes on. I think you're going to see a situation where like the Falcons are winning going into the fourth quarter and the Lions pull it off somehow in the end on like a game-winning field goal or something like that. It's how close I think this game is going to be. So I have the Falcons covering, and one of my favorite props in this game is both Jahmyr Gibbs. I said I think they're going to lean on him a lot in this game. His over-under rushing yards is 46.5. He has not done that at all so far this season, but being the lead back in this one against the Falcons run defense, I think he's going to hit that mark pretty easily. And then I also like Sam Laporta at over 37.5 receiving yards. He's averaging over 50 a game. He's pretty clearly Jared Goff's second favorite target. So I think he's going to get it just in sheer targets alone. He might amass that yards mark. So I have the Falcons covering, and those are my two favorite props.
Yeah, I have this. This line really confuses me because I think it opened at 3.5, and I'm stunned at why it's going the way of the Falcons. It's down to 3 now because I think this is Lions -3. I don't necessarily, as much as I think the Falcons, I did pick them to win the NFC South. They are basically Bijan Robinson and nothing else on offense. If you look at just the numbers passing wise for the Falcons, they do not have anything going in the passing game.
Yeah,
like
at least from a statistical output, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was like, they don't have a receiver that's eclipsed 100 yards yet on their team through 2 games. Like that's mind-boggling to me.
That's
and
rough.
So you're talking about that and Desmond Ridder. They just have not been in sync. And if it's just Bijan Robinson, the Lions actually have a very good front 7. So they're going to be gearing up, trying to stop Bijan Robinson, which again that'll be challenging. But again, if you're not going to present anything passing wise, that's going to be a pretty simplified game plan to prepare for the Lions against the Falcons. So I think it's Lions -3. I feel very comfortable about taking that one. In terms of just prop bets, there is one I would use definitely in a parlay of some sort. That it'd just be a free parlay play. Desmond Ridder right now on DraftKings has over under it's 1.5 touchdown passes. I don't think he's getting 2, so you can just take the under. It is juiced a lot. I think it's -260 right now, but you can just throw that into a parlay on any game. You could same game parlay that as something. So I would definitely recommend that. I do love the Laporta one. I think he's definitely I think he's definitely going to be able to cap that number. So those would probably be the only ones. And then I think this one's going to be Lions -3.
Give me Laporta. Give me all the juice on Laporta. He's on my fantasy team. So let's go. I think when you look at just the injury report here, the Lions are missing Taylor Decker, Kirby Joseph, Emmanuel Mosley, and Vaitai straight up out, and doubtful David Montgomery. And David Montgomery might not be the biggest deal. I just mentioned how they spent a first-round pick on a running back. But, he still does help split the backfield. But those other guys are big. Starting tackle, starting guard, starting corner, starting safety, and did I say starting corner? That's a lot of players in similar units, right? 2 guys on the O-line out, 2 guys in the secondary out. They have a great offense. They will put up points, but with a defense that was unspectacular last week, I don't love them missing players. And they are offensive line driven. The offense is driven by the offensive line, and so I just don't love that. I can't help but think the Lions are still more likely to win, but I picked the Falcons as a playoff team despite picking the Lions as a division winner. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes I like to look back on my preseason predictions and kind of trust my intuition going into the year. But again, it's just with +3, I'll probably ride that. I think this could be a really tight game, and even if the Lions come out on top, sometimes it's just nice to have points in your back pocket. So for this game, I'll take the Falcons +3. By the way, I'm trying to look back. How did we do last week? How did we do? I know I had a bad week. I did not have a good week.
I think I think I went 10-10. Oh wait, no. I was like, I think I was like 2 over or 2. I definitely was like 9-7. I think that's what it was.
Week 2, 9-7, and I was 7-9, and Bryson, you were also 7-9.
Mm-hmm.
So after a good week 1, my week 2 was less impressive, to be sure, which makes Kyle and I currently tied. You made up a little bit of ground on me from week 1. All right. So just wanted to check back and see where we are there. And I think last week, let's see, who did the best in week 2? Did anybody get 10? Doesn't look like it. Oh, yeah, we had Brett Pearson. Brett Pearson went 10-6. Nice.
I was like, good on him. I mean, there were a lot of swing possessions. The Rams and 49ers comes into mind immediately from week 2. It made a lot of bettors angry, I think.
Yeah. And Brett's done well overall. He did 9-7 in week 1 and then 10-6 in week 2. So he's currently heading up the standings as it is with Kyle, myself, and Jamie. And let's see. This Kyle on the stream, Kyle Sterrett, and then Jamie, kind of all right there. So early days where it's still tight, right? It's still tight, but just wanted to give a shout out to those who did well last week. All right. Back to the picks. Next up, we have the Saints +1 against the Packers. So a tight NFC game. This is really a pick'em, especially considering we're at Packers. So Saints are slightly favored. People have come down on the Packers slightly since their dominant performance against the Bears week 1, which they are still favored, but by only 1 point at home. That means that people are feeling pretty good overall about the Saints in this matchup. So, Bryson, what do you think? Are the aged Saints going to come through against the youthful Packers? What do you think?
I have the Packers covering this one mostly because I have them just winning the game, and when it's a 1-point spread, that's kind of all I need. I think one of the biggest things I have a problem with the Saints this year is they're moving the ball relatively well so far this season, but they can't finish drives. On the other side, the Packers are actually doing a pretty good job of finishing drives so far. I think it's fascinating that Jordan Love is tied for the league lead in touchdowns so far this year with 6. He has played way better than I thought he would so far to start this season. And the Saints team is already not having a good job of finishing drives. They're still without Alvin Kamara, obviously. There's no Jamal Williams. Their top 2 backs are gone. So they're going to lean on rookie Kendra Miller a lot today. And then Foster Moreau, who Derek Carr likes a lot at tight end, he's doubtful for this game. So they're losing weapons in an offense that can't finish drives, which I don't love. The Packers are also relatively injured. I mean, Aaron Jones is questionable. David Bakhtiari is questionable. No Elgin Jenkins, which is huge. But then you got Christian Watson. He's getting better. He might be able to play this week, which would be huge for that offense. But even without Christian Watson, I just think there's a lot going right for the Packers in this one where the Saints are just – I don't love anything that they're doing. And so I think the Packers are going to be able to do enough on offense to make it so the Saints can't keep up. And when in just a pick'em game, basically you lean on the team you think is going to win, and I just think the Packers are going to win this game.
Yeah, I'm been going back and forth on this. I'm having a tough time trying to figure it out because obviously I think this game opened at 2.5, and now it's down just to essentially 1. I'm gonna go with the Saints here, mainly because while the Saints haven't been impressive, they've literally just played in close games, and I do think even though the loss of Jamal Williams is a lot, this is this is definitely the toughest defense that Jordan Love's is gonna see so far this year. Like again, seeing the Falcons and the Bears isn't all that difficult. The Saints actually have a very good defense, so I'm riding with the fact that this will be the toughest test Jordan Love is. And if Jordan Love proves me wrong, then sure, I will be more than happy to say that I was wrong, but I gotta see it against a pretty stout defense like the Saints. And then also I think this is kind of those ones where Derek Carr figure it out finally and start punching it into the end zone. You started seeing Taysom Hill a little bit more. That'll help their run game, especially with Jamal Williams out. So I'm gonna go with the Saints. It's on the ESPN pick'em. It's plus 2.5. So that kind of changes the formula. So, but right now I know it's +1. I just take the Saints +1. Oop, I can't hear Max. Uh-oh.
Nope, I can't either.
There we go.
I muted myself. This is another situation where I'm just going to take the preseason predictions that I had and kind of roll with them early on. I know that it's easy to get swept up in the Packers right now, but I didn't pick the Packers to make the playoffs. I did pick the Saints to win their division. So I'm going to trust their veteran leadership there. Do I think it's going to be pretty for New Orleans? Not necessarily. The Packers have a good defense. This might be a rough game, but I do think they're going to win. So with any points at all, it's an obvious choice. And I think that it'll be a grinded out type of game. I think Jordan Love will play relatively well, all things considered. I think Derek Carr is going to be maybe not statistically blowing things up, which kind of sucks because he was my backup quarterback in fantasy to Aaron Rodgers. I'm just going to have to eat that. Maybe I'll play Mac Jones instead. I don't know. But it is the Jets defense. So I probably talked myself out of that just live here on the stream. But I'm going to take the Saints at +1 or +2.5, whichever it is. So, New Orleans Saints to defeat the Packers and start the season off strong in the win category. All right. We have the Denver Broncos at +6.5 against the Miami Dolphins. To be honest, I kind of expected the spread to be a little bit bigger here because just what the Dolphins have done from a statistical standpoint has been pretty impressive. And the Broncos are obviously coming out 0-2. They lost to both the Raiders in week 1, which I don't think really anybody expected. And then let's see, Bryson, you would know, who did they lose to again last week?
The Commanders.
The Commanders, which I picked the Commanders, so it was a little bit less surprising there, but still, they didn't. And last week they actually had a good performance offensively to start the game. I think they were up 21-3 to start things off. So, they can put up points, but after losing 2 games and the offense that the Dolphins have had, I kind of expected the spread to be a little bit bigger. So what do you think, Bryson? How do you feel about your Broncos going to get up against the Dolphins at +6.5?
Well, I told you guys last week that last week was the last time I'm picking the Broncos to cover a spread. So until they do it, I'm just going to lean on the Dolphins covering this one. It pains me to say it because I hate betting against my Broncos, but there's so much, especially like you mentioned, Max. The Dolphins, what they're doing on offense is insane, especially in the passing game. And they're putting up insane numbers right now. And really the biggest struggle for the Broncos this season, I think that's shocking a lot of people, is that defense. This defense for the Broncos is not performing well like people thought it would. They aren't really getting to the quarterback. I believe they're in the bottom 5 in the NFL in sacks so far this season. The secondary hasn't performed well, specifically Jamari Mathis, the second corner for the team. He has been picked on in both games. And in a team with Jalen Waddle as the second option, if he's able to play, which he's still questionable with a concussion. So if Jalen Waddle's able to play and he's the second option going against Damari Mathis for this game, that's dangerous for the Broncos. There's no Justin Simmons, which is huge for the Broncos team. I have more confidence in the Broncos offense being able to keep them in this game for a while because this offense is moving the ball. I believe they have the highest touchdown drive percentage in the NFL and the most points per possession in the NFL. So this Broncos offense is moving the ball and scoring pretty well. This passing game for the Dolphins, this offense for the Dolphins in general is what's scaring me heading into this one. So until the Broncos prove they can win a game first and then nonetheless cover in a game against a team like Miami, I'm going to take the Dolphins to cover it. I do like a Broncos prop. I like Javonte Williams over rushing yards, 48.5. The Dolphins don't have a very good run defense. It's kind of their biggest weakness on the team so far this year is their run defense isn't great. And I think they're going to lean on Javonte Williams in this game a little bit more as he gets healthier. And then if you can find the best odds on Tyreek Hill to score a touchdown, I would just take Hill to score. I think the best one I've seen so far is minus 120. So if you throw that in a parlay somewhere, that gives you a nice boost in your odds. So I think he's going to find the end zone somewhere.
Yeah, this is actually kind of a funny one. This is kind of a funny line because I was just thinking the Dolphins the entire time, and then as I kept on looking at the numbers, this is actually a spot where in terms of teams being desperate and like throwing the kitchen sink at it, this would be the play where you would take Broncos plus 6.5. You also have the history of Sean Payton being outstanding against the spread and after a loss. He's 63% after a loss. He's also 61% as an underdog after a loss against the spread. So you have that. And then Russell Wilson also is in the 60s in both of those categories as well. So again, it may not seem like you can make a good argument to take the Broncos here, but this is also one of these weird things. The NFL is weird. This is professional football. It's still a pretty sizable spread. And at some point, these teams aren't perfect in terms of trying to hit the spread every single time. And the Dolphins may have the offense. I don't really have much of a in terms of on the field rationale for this. This one's just purely on the numbers. I'll take the Broncos plus 6.5, and I'm probably gonna regret it. But I could also tell you, hey man, that's what the number said next week. So I'll take Broncos 6.5 here.
I do have another funny note I just thought about with this game. I don't know how common this is. I just think it's kind of funny. The Broncos have opened up 3 straight weeks playing against a team with a head coach or coordinator that was a pretty significant coach for the Broncos. Because Josh McDaniels week 1, Jack Del Rio week 2, and now Vic Fangio this week. I think it's kind of a funny coincidence there.
Yeah, no, that's actually true. NFL certainly has a way of scheduling storylines, especially early in the year, right? If the storyline is pre-existing, they try and get it early because the other storylines write themselves as the year goes on. So it does make sense. So for me, the issue with this game is that while I know that the Dolphins don't have the greatest run defense, I have a feeling that this is going to be a 2-score game by some point in the first quarter, which is going to make it hard for the Broncos to play the way they want to with Javonte Williams. And then the Dolphins are going to start to be able to release their pass rush on Russell Wilson. And I'm not saying this is going to be a blowout, but I do think it's going to make it harder on the Broncos to kind of keep pace and play offense the way that they want to. So I'm going to pick the Dolphins to cover 6.5 here. Now, I think that this is probably going to be an 8 to 10 point win. That's the way that I anticipate this going down. So I'm not trying to prognosticate a blowout, but I think from a point differential, this is going to go exactly the way the Dolphins want it to. Whereas with week 1 against the Chargers, they just put up a crazy amount of points, and then they kind of couldn't stop the Chargers offense until it really mattered at the very end. And then in week 2, they put up points, but then Belichick slowed them down a little bit, but they were able to hold the Patriots offense to, a relatively modest output. I think this game is kind of going to go exactly how the Dolphins planned their season to go, which is put up a lot of points, get an early lead, and then just send guys after the quarterback when they're trying to catch up. So I'm going to take the Dolphins at -6.5 here. Speaking of the Chargers, we now have them up against the Vikings. This is a battle of desperation teams, 2-2 teams, both who made the playoffs last year. So that means somebody has to win. The Vikings have had a good offensive showing. The Chargers have had a good offensive showing, and neither team has had a good defense through 2 weeks. Now, one has an offensive head coach. The other one has a defensive head coach. So the expectations there are feeling probably a little bit more frustrated depending on which side you're looking at. So the Vikings are -0.5 point favorite. So this is as close to a pick'em as you can possibly be without being a straight +0 spread. So, Brison, what do you think? Do you think the Chargers are able to get their first win on the road here, or do you think the Vikings help get their season a little bit back on track with a win over the Chargers?
I don't really love going with either of these teams in this game, but I'm going to pick the Vikings. And a lot of it has to do with this defense of the Chargers, specifically against the pass, has been atrocious. And if there's anything the Vikings have done exceptionally well, is throw the football. Now, they've had to do it a ton to start the season, but they've thrown the football very well. Justin Jefferson is on an absurd pace. He has 309 yards so far through 2 games. I just think you're going to see Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison really tear up the secondary for the Chargers. I am worried about the offensive line for the Vikings going against this defense for the Chargers, but Joey Bosa's not 100%. He's questionable right now. So even if he plays, he's not 100%. I think I saw this fascinating stat that was like, there's only 2 players in the NFL with a 0% pass rush win rate percentage right now, and one of them's Khalil Mack. So he's done nothing this season, which is just fascinating to me. So
Oh my God.
I think it's good. I think that's really interesting going into this game. This defense for the Chargers has just been so bad. And even though the Vikings defense has also been pretty equally as bad, the one thing they've actually done relatively well, the Vikings have, is they haven't been beaten against the pass very much. They are 9th, or they're 8th so far in the NFL in passing yards allowed. So they haven't let a quarterback tear them up so far this season. So I think you've got a horrible, horrible pass defense on one side against a team who wants to throw the ball a ton, going against a defense that's actually fared pretty well against the pass. And then, I just think the loss of Eckler has really rattled this offense in a lot of ways for the Chargers. So I think you're going to see them be a little bit choppy to start this game too. So I don't love it. I don't love going with either of these teams, but I'm going to take the Vikings in this one.
Yeah, this is a game that I think in terms of entertainment level, this will be very, very fun to watch. 2 desperate teams are always going to bring out, I think is always going to bring out a lot of interesting plays and a lot of explosive plays and a lot of great plays. And I think right now it's the highest total game on the board. So anticipate a lot of scoring. Wouldn't be shocked if this is in the high 20s, and definitely one team's going to get into the 30s, I believe, in this game. So, again, this is a hard one to read. I picked the Vikings to win the NFC North, so I using Max's logic, kind of need to lean into my preseason picks and kind of hope that the Vikings turn this around. So I'll take the Vikings minus the 0.5 point here. The thing about the Vikings is they got to develop some level of a run game. Cam Akers isn't going to play in this game, so they're going to have to trust Madison, who has not looked great at all this season. So if they can't, I think they're going to be able to have a little bit more success because for whatever reason, the Chargers can't do anything well defensively, even with a defensive head coach. So I'm just relying on that. And then Bryson, I think you hit the point hit the nail right on the head there. No Austin Eckler just means that Justin Herbert's slinging the ball around, and that's pretty hard on him to just carry the load offensively, even though he's a spectacular talent. Having to rely on him to just go out there and get you 30 points may not be the best strategy when you don't have any run game to help support him. So I'll take the Vikings minus a half point here.
Man, this is tough because I think that the Vikings went into this season being pleased with what they did last year and being aware that they're taking a step back. I think they realized that last year was an overachievement in terms of the new regime coming in, and they made it to the playoffs. They were never a great team from back to front, but they were a good offense, and they had some things go their way, and they were able to put up points consistently, which is always a good thing. And going into this year, they probably anticipate, from a big picture perspective, that the playoffs were not necessarily as likely as I think a lot of people expected.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Chargers are in a very different situation, right? Their head coach has been there for longer. Their GM has been there since like 2013, right? And so they need success. They need it for their jobs. Whereas the Vikings, I think they've built themselves a little bit of rope, right? And now if they don't make it to the playoffs, they have the opportunity to sort of build the team in finality how they want to going into next year. Whereas if the Chargers don't make the playoffs, nobody is staying. It's just not going to happen. And so while my preseason prediction was for the Vikings to not make the playoffs and the Chargers to make the playoffs, I'm not sure either of them is going to at this point. And I think I was pretty spot on with my anticipation for how the Vikings were going to go. And I'm a little surprised that the Chargers haven't been able to get it done yet. I think they're just more desperate. And while that doesn't always translate to wins, I think in this particular game where they match up so identically with a strong offense and a barely there defense, I just think that this is a game where they just need it more. And so I'm going to take the Chargers at plus 0.5 to win this game. And I'm not sure what that means for the rest of their season. I think it's disappointing, and I don't really expect them to make the playoffs, which means my prediction was wrong. But I think in this matchup in week 3, where one of these teams has to go, basically has to go at least 1 and 2, I think the Chargers pull it out. And then we'll see what happens.
I do also have a really fun prop I just found on DraftKings. They do weekly specials for a lot of games, and their weekly special for this game is Justin Jefferson 150 receiving yards, 150 plus receiving yards. It's at plus 400, so it's huge odds on something he's done twice in a row so far this season. So I think it's risky betting on someone to have 150 yards, but if there's someone I'm going to bet on, it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson.
Take it.
Yeah.
Take it.
Yeah. I mean, that's worth it. I mean, it's like he's definitely capable of it. It's like he's got, again, I'm a big trends guy, so I do that. I actually forgot to mention this. I was looking at the player props for Joshua Kelly, and you guys want to take a guess on how many receptions he has right now as the running back?
Oof.
7 or 8?
Yeah, I was going to say
0.
about 8. Oh,
0.
0?
So, right now,
yes.
right now I'm looking like his receptions is at 2.5 right now, and it's juiced to the under. Again, I brought up you can take things and parlay them. You could take Ritter, parlay that with the Kelly under receptions, and I'd say you're definitely in plus money. I think you're not gonna be sweating that very much. So just a note there. I was actually looking at that because I noticed Kelly didn't have any receptions. And sometimes, when you're the lead back, your numbers get juiced. And they certainly have juiced them up a little bit more than I anticipated.
Interesting. Well, with Eckler out, Well, with Eckler out, he might be getting some receptions, but at the same time, with the Vikings defense not really being great, they might not check it down very often either.
No.
So we'll see. But yeah, no, that's an interesting play. All right, we've talked about the Broncos. We've talked about the Chargers. That means it's time to talk about the Jets. So, look, last week I banged the table pretty hard saying that a spread that big against the Jets defense, it's no guarantee, but you don't want to take the Jets. I mean, you don't want to take a team against the Jets defense with a spread that big. Well, unfortunately, the defense didn't show up the way that we've come to expect it to over the past 2 seasons, and the Jets did not cover their underdog spread. Now they have only a 2.5-point underdog spread against the Patriots, and it is at home. So Zach Wilson has historically been extremely bad against the Patriots. In his rookie year, the first game against the Patriots, he was playing okay, and then he got hurt. That was his first NFL injury. Last year, he played 2 games against them, and they were both absolutely horrendous. I don't love it when someone kind of has the stank against a particular team, especially a young player, because they tend to psych themselves out when they go up against that team. But I want to see what you guys have to say about this. Bryson, how do you feel about the Patriots as 2.5-point favorites against the Jets going into week 3?
I'm actually going to take the Jets to cover this one, and I'm going to lean on that defense again. I think this defense has a chance to just really, really make life hard on Mac Jones in this offense. I know Mac Jones has played okay. He's had to throw the ball a ton to start the season. They've made him throw the ball 96 times so far through 2 games, which is just
insanity.
Entirely too many for Mac Jones. That's way too many throws. Almost too many throws for anyone. But for Mac Jones specifically, that's a ton. He's done okay at it. He does have 2 interceptions so far this season, so he's kind of been putting the ball in harm's way a little bit more often than I think people anticipated. But I think this defense for the Jets just has the ability to stop what the Patriots offense wants to do, because it's a grinded out offense. They're not going to have very many explosive plays. They have to have these like 10 plus play drives to get in scoring position a lot. I just don't think against this defense that's going to be possible. Whereas the Jets offense has not looked great, especially with Zach Wilson so far this season. And like you mentioned, Max, Zach Wilson really struggles against Bill Belichick. The Jets in general struggle against Bill. I think, was it been since 2015 was the last time the Jets beat the Patriots, I think I saw.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And so none of that should lean you to pick the Jets, but I think the Jets offense has just enough of like big playmakers where they can hit 1 or 2 plays, get themselves in good scoring positions, whereas the Patriots offense just has to have everything go right against a defense like this to score. So I don't think it's going to happen. So I think it's going to be the over-under's 36 points, which is just hilarious to look at in an NFL game. But I think I would lean towards the under in this game. I think it's going to be tough for both teams to score. I just think the Jets and their ability to have big plays every now and then is going to put them in position to keep it close. So I'm going to have the Jets covering this game.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. One note on that, I think there's a tropical storm heading up into the northeastern part of the United States, so that definitely would play into the under factor. I would definitely look at the under as well. In terms of sides to bet on, I'm actually going with the Patriots -2.5 here. I think the Patriots probably have been the most, or like in terms of schedule-wise, one of the more unlucky teams, because you open your season with the Eagles and you immediately spot them 16 points just by sheer stupid play. But if you look, and they basically did the same with the Dolphins, just spying them points. But if you look at how they actually have played outside of those moments, they've actually probably played about, in the 8 quarters they played, 6 really good quarters of football. And so I think it's just pure circumstance that they've literally had 2 of the top teams in this league to open their season. And so while I do believe that they should be 0-2. I think they're maybe one of the better 0-2 teams, as weird as that sounds. So, and I just haven't seen anything from the Jets offense since Zach Wilson took over. That makes me comfortable thinking that they're going to be able to at least keep this hanging around. I would expect the Patriots not to throw it as much, especially if a tropical storm is in that area. Hell, we've seen Bill Belichick just decide to only throw the ball 3 times in a game. So he is not gonna stay locked in on one style of play. I could see a lot of use for Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott on Sunday. So I'll take the Patriots -2.5 just on the sheer sense of, look, the Patriots are desperate. I don't think they're as bad as their record suggests. And I just haven't seen anything on the Jets side, aside from their defense, that really makes me comfortable thinking that it's going to turn out in a way where the Jets squeak out a win or even cover a 2.5-point spread.
You know, I will say that in the past 2 showings against the Patriots, the Jets did not have Breece Hall or Elijah Vera-Tucker, who are key to their offense. If there is a tropical storm coming in, certainly the Patriots are happy to grind it out on the ground. But I think the Jets would almost be relieved, right, that that's the way that it goes. And I think trying to tackle Breece Hall is hard enough as it is. You want to throw in inclement weather. You want to throw in, wet pads. This game could really be a slosh fest in terms of fumbles, in terms of turnovers, and it might not even be the quarterback's fault just because of the way that the game is lined up to play out. The Patriots and the Jets offensive line are both are both towards the bottom of the league in terms of pass block win rate right now. So I just think when you combine that, this is probably just going to be a run heavy game. And so this could be close. This could be a game where the Patriots win and the Jets still cover, or the Jets could win and it'll be close. So I'm not really sure if I feel good about this in any way whatsoever. I don't really have great football reasons because I think these teams are constructed similarly. Now, the dynamicism of the pass rush and the defense is probably greater on the Jets side of things, but the defense playing well and the offense being relatively unspectacular, they both fit the mold. But at least the Jets have the playmakers, right? Breece Hall or a Garrett Wilson can take it to the house on any play. We've seen that in week 1 and week 2. Whereas with the Patriots, they have to work so much harder to get in the end zone. And so I'm just going to take the Jets because if the weather is bad, one big play might just make the difference in this game. So I'm going to take the explosive capability and just hope that the Jets get out of this 2-1. All right. The Buffalo Bills are -6 favorites over the Commanders. This is a fun game, right? So we have a 2-0 Commanders team hosting a 1-1 Bills team. This Commanders team is good. They're straight up good. I think their offensive line is probably the least special part about what they do, whereas going into the season, most people would have anticipated the quarterback being the least special part about what they do. But they have playmakers. They have a quarterback who's getting it done. They've got pass rush, and they've got secondary playmakers. So this is a good team from back to front, with the offensive line being the one thing that hasn't even played bad, but also hasn't played the most dynamic of defenses up to this point. So this might be the week where we don't see, the best performance from them. And the Bills are coming off of a get-right game. So, Brison, how do you feel about them going into the Commanders' house and trying to cover a 6-point spread?
I actually really like the Commanders in this game, especially 6 points is way too many. I don't know if the Commanders are going to win this game. I think they have a good chance to, honestly. But I think even if you like the Bills enough, I think giving the Commanders 6 points is a little insane to me the way they've played so far this season. Washington, I think, or one of the things I think was funny, you mentioned last week was a get-right game for the Bills. They did a lot of good things in that game, but they didn't sack Jimmy Garoppolo once in that game. Jimmy Garoppolo was untouched, which I just thought was fascinating considering the margin of victory they had and the way that defense played. And so the Buffalo Bills defense really hasn't gotten to the quarterback much at all so far this season. They only have 3 sacks so far, and all 3 of them came in their first game against the Jets offensive line. I think Washington's offensive line is playing fine. It's not great, but I think they're protecting Sam Howell enough, and Sam Howell was playing really good football. And that defensive line for the Commanders is off to a great start. They have 10 sacks. They're tied for the league lead in sacks so far this season. And one thing we've seen with Josh Allen, if you can pressure him enough and you can get to Josh Allen enough, he's going to make mistakes at some point in the game. I think this is the Commanders defense that can force Josh Allen to make a mistake or two and keep the Commanders in the game longer than people probably think they should be. Josh Allen's already been sacked 7 times, and a lot of those tend to be on Josh for trying to extend plays. I think you can see a lot of the same situations happening in this one. And then I like a lot about that Commanders offense, a lot of the weapons around Sam Howell. He has plenty to keep it close. Eric Bieniemy is calling a very good system for Sam Howell too. So I don't know if Washington can win this game, but I do think that they're good enough to keep it within a touchdown. So I'm going to have the Commanders covering this one.
Yeah, this is very interesting because I do think the Bills win this game. The number just kind of weird, but I was just looking this over and I wanted to make sure. So if you think the Bills are going to win, the numbers say you should take the -6 in these cases, because in the past 32 games, in their past 32 wins, they've won by at least 8 points in 28 out of those 32 games. So if you think the Bills are going to win this game, they're going to win big. They usually win big. So that's kind of my rationale here for the Bills -6. Also, I think the again, we're talking about a 2-0 Commanders team, but again, their wins are against the Arizona Cardinals, who I think we can all agree are trying to tank. They definitely tried to tank last weekend. And then against the Broncos, who they had to have a miraculous comeback against. So if those are your 2 wins, kind of a big step up in competition going against the Bills. So I'm going with the Bills -6 here. I also think the one thing to note here with the Bills that I thought was important in their week 2 game, they actually started running the ball. They committed to running the ball with someone else other than Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
James Cook actually got a lot of good touches and made a lot of good chunk runs, which is what this Bills offense needs, as opposed to running Josh Allen, having him get those 5 to 4 yards per carry. I think I love all their weapons on the outside for the Bills in this game, like Kincaid and Knox, and then obviously Diggs and Gabe Davis actually had a large target day. So I think the Bills are going to win, and if they're going to win by more than 6 points. If they win, they win big. So I'm going to take the Bills -6. I don't have an issue if you think the Commanders are going to cover, you might as well sprinkle them to win on the money line, because again, that's the way the Bills have been. They either lose close games or they win big. So I'm going with the Bills -6 here, though.
I'm going to take the Commanders +6 or +6.5, which is what the Pigskin Pick'em has them at, because this defense for the Commanders is exactly what Josh Allen struggles with. A dynamic playmaking secondary with a strong pass rush, because what happens with Josh Allen is you get him to dink and dunk a little bit, and then he gets frustrated and he wants the big play, and he makes it linger in the pocket just a little bit too long, and he just sets himself up for turnovers. And this is the exact kind of defense that can capitalize on that. And so even though I clearly anticipate the Bills offense being better than the Commanders offense, the Commanders defense is ready to go. I mean, seeing Chase Young out there actually looking good as a rusher with what they already have across the defensive line. Now, they might not have as deep of a defensive line as some of the other teams out there in terms of just waves of rushers, but from a starting 1 to 4 across the line, they're just about as good as anybody out there. And I think that Josh Allen is going to get frustrated. I don't think he's going to enjoy this game at all whatsoever. Bills' offensive line has not been good. So I hear the historical tendency with the Bills. If they win, they cover usually. But I still would lean towards winning but not covering the spread against the Commanders, because I just think they're just a little better across the board and will probably squeak out the victory. But I think 6.5 points or 6 is just a little too much for how I anticipate it breaking down. So that's how I feel about it. All right. Moving from one relatively large spread to one that's quite large, we have the Houston Texans going to visit the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the big thing about this game is that the Texans secondary is decimated. They're missing Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley Jr., and starting nickel corner Tavir Thomas. Laramie Tunsil is questionable as well, but to me, that secondary missing 3 out of its 5 starters, especially its more highly drafted young dynamic players, is rough, right? I think we can anticipate the Jaguars having a really good day with Christian Kirk, with Calvin Ridley. So I think that is off breaks why the line is at 9.5. So Bryson, what do you think? Do you think that they've got this right? Do you think that the Jaguars have enough juice to outdo that spread, or do you think the Texans surprise here?
This one's actually kind of tough to me because I had the Jaguars winning this division pretty easily. I think most people did. And in this game, you look at these two matchups, you go, oh, the Jaguars should win this game pretty easily. But they have not performed as well as I thought they would to start the season. I mean, they let the Colts hang around for a long time in that game. And that offense was really bad against Kansas City a week ago. Like, that offense had nothing going for them. This is a very different defense. The Texans' defense is not nearly as good as Kansas City's is, especially missing as many players in the secondary as they are. So it's not one of my most confident ones. I'm going to take the Jaguars to cover here, largely because I think you're going to get in a situation where Trevor Lawrence figures it out early in this game. He hits Calvin Ridley, he gets Travis Etienne going, and they get off to a pretty big lead, and they just force CJ Stroud to throw the ball a ton. They force CJ Stroud to drop back and let those pass rushers get to him a ton. And I like CJ Stroud. I think he's actually done relatively well to start his rookie year. I like a lot of the receivers more than most people. I think Nico Collins is playing at a very good level so far this season, but I just don't think they have enough offensively for the Texans to keep up with the Jaguars. I think you're going to see we saw the Bills have a get-right game against the Raiders. I think this is a similar situation for the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are looking at themselves going, they should have been better to start this season, especially on offense. And I think they're going to figure out against this pretty decimated Texans defense. So I'm going to take the Jaguars to cover here. It's not my favorite. I don't love big spreads like this, especially when the favorite team has not performed exceptionally well to start the season. But I think this is a spot where the Jaguars can get it going this week. So I'm going to take the Jaguars to cover.
So, I am also in the same line of thinking as you, Bryson. I don't love this large spread for the Jaguars. And that being said, you know what? I keep on going back to this because when I see large spreads, I like looking at like certain trends of like what this team has been with certain people on it. And so I'm actually going to change my mind right here and take the Texans plus 9.5 here. And the main reason why is, one, the AFC South, nothing in the AFC South makes sense. This is the randomest division you'll ever find in terms of like results. Because I remember when we were doing this last year, around the same time last year, this was the line, and the Jaguar, and you both took the Jaguars, and I said, I'm gonna take the Texans because doesn't make sense. Trevor Lawrence is 0-4 as a favorite when he's a 4-point or more favorite. So kind of just like going through that in my mind, there's not a lot I love in terms Texans defensively, but if you look at the Texans offensively, they can put up enough points to keep this game to be within range for covering a 9.5-point spread. So I'm gonna go with that just in the sense that the Jaguars still seem like they're going through some things offensively, trying to get everybody acclimated to all the weapons. So I'm going to take the Texans here, thinking they're going to find a way to squeak in the back door and get the 9.5-point cover.
All right, I get it. 9.5 is a lot. I don't love the spread. I really don't. But in week 1, the Jaguars covered a 4.5-point spread against the Colts. Then, in week 2, the Indianapolis Colts, despite only having a 1.5-point spread, beat the Texans by 11 points.
Mm-hmm.
And the Texans are now without 3 of their starting secondary players and Denzel Perryman at the linebacker core. This is going to be bad, guys. This is going to be bad. It's going to be ugly. I'm just praying that those targets go to Calvin Ridley for my fantasy team, but the targets are going places. They're going somewhere, and I do anticipate the Texans the Jaguars covering this 9.5-point spread. And I don't like big spreads. I really don't. But this Texans team could not have lost the players that they did at a worse time. I mean, they are going 0-3, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be a bit ugly in the process, in my humble opinion. All right. The Indianapolis Colts are plus 7.5 underdogs against the Baltimore Ravens in Maryland. So we have, do they play in Maryland or do they play? Yeah, they play in Maryland. They play in close enough to Baltimore. Yeah, it's the Commanders that play in Virginia, right? They technically play in Virginia. So the Colts are going to be missing Ryan Kelly, quarterback Anthony Richardson, and they have Dallas Flowers, Kenny Moore II, and Quentin Nelson is questionable. Ravens are missing Odell Beckham, Justice Hill, Marlon Humphrey, Tyler Linderbaum, Odafe Owe, Ronnie Stanley, and Marcus Williams, not to mention their starting running back and J.K. Dobbins, who went down in week 1. I mean, from back to front, this game is missing the most starters by far. This is brutal. So, Bryson, what do you think? I mean, obviously the Ravens are fairly heavily favored and probably would be more if they weren't missing so many guys. But at the very least, they have their starting quarterback in the lineup, which is, depending on how you feel about Gardner Minshew, is probably strongly benefiting them. Do you think that they can cover 7.5 at home?
I think so, and it's a bummer that Anthony Richardson's hurt for this game, because I think if Anthony was playing, I might have taken the Colts to cover this one, especially because you mentioned earlier with the Jets game, Kyle, the torrential storm that's coming this weekend is going to lean into a run-heavy game, and without Anthony Richardson and without Taylor for the Colts, you're going to lean heavily on Zach Moss against the rush defense for the Ravens, which has performed very well to start this season. And then you're playing into the Ravens' strength, which is their run game. Even without J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards played pretty well last week. He had 62 yards and 10 carries. Lamar Jackson's going to run the ball a lot. This Colts defense is horrible against the pass so far this season. So I think they're going to see a lot of running to open up just easy play action plays for Lamar Jackson, for Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and all those guys. So I'm not too worried about all the injuries for the Ravens holding them back in this game. I think the weather is going to play too big a factor. I think the Colts having to lose Anthony Richardson is going to play too big a factor. And then I think if all that plays into what the Ravens want to do on offense and on defense. One of my favorite props in this game is a defensive prop. I like DeForest Buckner, even though I like the Ravens to cover the spread. I think Buckner gets a sack. If he just records one sack, he's at plus 140 odds. With all those injuries on that Ravens offensive line, I think with what little pass attempts there are, you're going to see Buckner at least get really close to Lamar Jackson a few times. So, and leading to at least one sack. And then I would take the over in every rushing prop. That would be my best guess for everyone going into this game. But the most important one is the Ravens covering the spread.
Yeah, I'm definitely biased in this game. I'm actually taking the Colts plus 7.5 here. The thing is about this, like, as much as the Colts missed Anthony Richardson, you saw what Gardner Minshew is. Like, Gardner Minshew is like a actually very good, like, low end starter in this league, I think. And I think you saw a little bit of that when he just came in. Now, granted, it's against the Texans, so I'm not weighing that too much. But I think you kind of see where he's not going to be able to push the ball down the field. But then again, the Colts don't really have anybody that can challenge you downfield, and he's really good in finding the tight windows and needing to put the ball into places where it has to go. So I'm not incredibly worried, or like, I don't know how much of a downgrade it is when you have a rookie quarterback going against the Ravens if Anthony Richardson was healthy. I just mainly like the Colts plus 7.5 here because I do think their defense is good against the run. And so if the tropical storm does hit, it's gonna force the run. Colts are very stout runs. Zaire Franklin's leading the league in tackles and assists, combined tackles right now. So I would definitely expect the Colts to be able to stop it on the up front, and then obviously the rain. I'm not a huge fan of Lamar Jackson in terms of like as a pocket passer, so I'm not anticipating him being able to throw it at will against the Colts. But I personally just think this is too much of a spread. If it was 6.5, I'd probably go with the Ravens, but I totally can see the Colts losing this by 7. So I'll take the Colts 7.5.
I'm taking the Ravens here because if the storm hits, which I think there's a really good chance that it does, you have to be able to run the ball. And I think that Lamar has developed tremendously as a passer. I think he's a good passer, and I think this scheme benefits him. But it might not be a day for anybody passing.
Right.
And if that's the case, then you just need somebody who's going to be able to run the ball dynamically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody in this game is more capable of doing that than he is. And like you said, Bryson, it's kind of a shame because this would have been really fun to watch these two quarterbacks running all over the place against each other. But without Richardson in, that kind of makes it a little bit easier for me where, you know, you'll have drop back situations and then you'll just have Jackson going off and you'll just have guys slipping all over the place trying to tackle him. That's how I anticipate this going down. If the weather surprises us and is not as bad, I do still think the Ravens win, but maybe the spread is not covered as easily because it just doesn't suit them in that same way. But as it stands, I'll take the Ravens to cover 7.5 points. All right. The Panthers travel to Seattle as 6.5 point underdogs. The second of the rookie quarterbacks that are missing today, Bryce Young for the Panthers, not going to be in. They're also possibly going to miss Justin Houston, listed as questionable. Seahawks will be without Kobe Bryant, Charles Cross, and likely without Will Dissly and Tariq Woolen. So 3 of the rookies that played tremendously well for them last year are not in. They also are 100% missing their other rookie tackle from last year who's on injured reserve. And then Jamal Adams, DJ Dallas, Quandre Diggs, Phil Haynes, Julian Love, DK Metcalf, Jaron Reed, and it's so long that my ticker I have to wait for it to catch up with me here. All these guys are listed as questionable. So even if they do play, they are all banged up. Safety, Julian Love. I think I mentioned DK Metcalf, Jaron Reed. Okay, that's it. So they're hurting. They've got a lot of players hurt. And they are 1-1. Panthers are 0-2. And it's at home. They still have their starting quarterback while the Panthers don't. To be honest, especially not being in the rain on the East Coast, I'm kind of wondering why this spread isn't bigger, but maybe you guys have insight as to why that may be. What do you think, Bryson?
I think the biggest reason why the spread isn't as big as people might think is just solely because of the injuries for this Seahawks team, and they are missing or questionable with so many players, so many key players too. It's not like they're missing their fifth wide receiver and their third defensive lineman or stuff like that. They're missing or a lot of starters are questionable heading into this one. Despite all of that, I am going to take the Seahawks to cover this one. I think they figured it out a lot offensively versus the Lions last week. Now it was against the Lions defense, which hasn't performed up to standards people thought they would coming into this one. But I think Geno Smith specifically, I think he figured out a lot of things with how many weapons he has. He has so many weapons to his disposal. I think he found that fine line on how to get them all a proper amount of targets and keep the offense flowing and moving and everything. So I think offensively for the Seahawks, I think they figured it out. And this Panthers offense is so hard to watch. They might be the least explosive offense in the NFL, and the Patriots are in the NFL. Like this offense has no downfield threat. Their run game with Miles Sanders hasn't really done much yet. And I think you're going to see the Seahawks just kind of.
I was on mute, but you just made me laugh out loud, Bryson.
Thank you. I thought that was a good line. I think the Seahawks team is just going to run all over the field against this Panthers team with a backup quarterback with Andy Dalton coming into this one. I think it's a tough spot for the Panthers to be in. And despite all the injuries, I think the Seahawks are good enough to cover this one. One of my favorite props in this game, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 3.5 receptions. He's averaging 4 receptions a game, so it's right at that line. But it's at plus money, and he had 5 last week. I think Geno Smith is finding him on quicker, easier routes a lot more often so far. So I'd like him to get a decent amount of targets heading into this one.
Yeah, take that. I love that.
Yeah, I was like, he's definitely like their slot receiver and the quick guy, and so the Seahawks run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So I like that a lot. This might actually be my favorite bet. I was like Seahawks minus 6.5 here. As much as Andy Dalton's a veteran and everything, I think the Seahawks are a really good team. I thought last week when they were a pretty sizable, pretty good number underdog to the Lions was a overreaction to everybody hating on them from week 1. I thought that I took the Seahawks no problem. I think the Seahawks are a good team. I don't really know how the Panthers are going to keep this within a touchdown of a game. They just don't see. There's nothing I've seen offensively that suggests that they're going to be able to keep up offensively. And I think the Seahawks can put. I'm pretty sure the Seahawks can put close to 27, 30 points on this Panthers team. And so if you're telling me the Panthers are getting to 20 points, I just don't see how that's going to happen based on what I've seen so far. So I would just take the Seahawks minus 6.5. And I feel very comfortable just watching and seeing who on the Seahawks goes off and has a day.
So I agree. Now, here's the thing. Man, this is just a week of picking the favored teams in big spreads. Talk about favorite big spreads. We have another one coming up here. But a couple actually. But so here's the thing about this game. Really, the Panthers are a good defense. They have a good front. They've got Brian Burns. They've got Derek Brown. And they've got some playmakers in the secondary as well. But I think Geno Smith is going to be able to just be methodical. I think he's going to be able to just work up and down the field. And this is not going to be blowout territory. It's not. But 6.5 points, it's not a crazy spread, right? You can win by a touchdown. You can win by 10 points and still cover this very comfortably. I think that with all of their playmakers still healthy, despite losing players on the offensive line and on the defensive side of the ball, they're very much able to still move the ball against a team that just doesn't really have much offensively. And Adam Thielen is, aside from Miles Sanders, he's probably their best offensive player. And Sanders is explosive, but he kind of needs those gaps to be open. He's not really a make things happen type guy. And Thielen, he can catch 10 passes for like 48 yards because he'll average whatever.
Yeah.
He'll average like 8 yards a catch. And so I just don't really see where the big plays are coming from for them. So I will take the Seahawks to cover 6.5 points as well.
You
All
did
right.
bring up an interesting point with Thielen. His number's 3.5 for receptions, and it's plus 100. So
Yeah,
I definitely look at that since they're
Yeah.
going to be behind a lot.
I think he'll dwarf that number, but I just
Yep.
don't. I wouldn't take the over on a yardage output though.
Oh, yes.
All right, so the Chicago Bears,
Ugh.
who just have had the worst possible week. I mean, did you see yesterday? After everything that went down, I think yesterday, it came out that they lost $100,000 worth of equipment
Man.
being robbed. Like, what in the world? Like, what else could go wrong at this point? I don't even know. But aside from all of the other BS, the Kansas City Chiefs may not be 13.5-point favorites against anyone else this year. And they might win 14 games, but they won't have a spread this big against anybody. The Bears are looking rough right now. They're looking rough defensively. They're looking rough offensively. And now that Chris Jones is back, this could be a long day for Justin Fields. That being said, it is still a pretty big spread. So do you think the Bears can cover 13.5 on the road?
It's a huge spread, and I hate taking big spreads, but I can't convince myself to take the Bears in this game. There's so much going wrong for them right now on the field and off the field. They're going into Arrowhead in this game, which is just, of all the weeks to have all of this go on, this week heading into Arrowhead might have been the worst timing imaginable, because that's going to be such a hard place for them to play. And Kansas City has not looked great to start this season. I think we talked about a couple of these teams getting get-right games. This is a get-right game for the Chiefs. You could see them jump off to like a 21-0 start and just force the Bears to have to throw the ball a million times to even try to get in this thing. There's so much. The Bears offense sucks. The Bears defense sucks. Kansas City's getting healthier. They have Travis Kelce back for a second week in a row. I think he's going to have a big game. Chris Jones in that defense, I think they're going to make life so hard on Justin Fields. And I know 13.5 points is a huge number, but I can see this game being a 20-plus point blowout for the Chiefs with everything going on for the Bears. The Bears can't even run the ball, and that was their strength last year. They could run the ball with either their running backs and Justin Fields, and that's what kept them in a lot of games last year. They can't run the ball with anyone right now, and Justin Fields is having a hard time reading the defenses. The offensive line can't protect Justin Fields, and now you've got Chris Jones coming after him. It's going to be an ugly game. I think you're going to see this game be over by halftime, and Patrick Mahomes may not play the fourth quarter. It's going to be one of those games, I think.
Yeah, we were talking, Max, you were laying out all the bad things that have happened to the Bears this week. Well,
I didn't even hit everything.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, like, what would the punctuation would be them getting run over by the Chiefs? Like, that would be the punctuation of a horrid week. So if we're all leaning that way, then yeah, I'm going with the Chiefs minus 13.5. Obviously it's a big spread, but again, we're just waiting for the punctuation on a really crappy week for the Bears, and it just so happens that the Super Bowl champions are right there ready to deliver the final blow on this week. So I would take the Chiefs here. I know it's a big number, but again, when you have Patrick Mahomes, I don't really feel that bad about taking such a huge spread. I just don't see a lot of ways where the Chiefs or where the Bears are going to be able to stay within the 2 touchdown range, because again, while the offense hasn't looked great for the Chiefs, that defense has been really good. Like again, like the whole thing with them losing to the Lions, that defense was actually playing really good. It just was, and the Lions literally just won that because of a pick 6. So I'm very, very high on what the Chiefs defense looks like. So I'm not sure the Bears can get into double digits in terms of a team score. So I take the Chiefs minus 13.5. And yeah, Bryson, I would not be shocked if Mahomes isn't playing in the fourth quarter at all.
As Thanos said, dread it, run from it. I want no part of this spread. Like, I don't. If it wasn't for the fact that we have to pick it, I would not even be considering this because I hate 13.5 points. I just can't find a way to justify taking the Bears, which is insane because that is a massive spread. The one thing I'll say is that Justin Fields may break out as a rusher. At 0-2, with things going as ugly as they have, that is the one thing that could change the dynamic of this matchup. But still, they do have a good defense. And as ugly as it's been for the Chiefs offensively through 2 weeks, another week back for Travis Kelce changes the dynamic of that. And so even though I'm not sure of anything, I have to take it. Because aside from Justin Fields running the ball and being effective on that front, I cannot think of anything that makes me want to lean towards the Chiefs. And that being said, when he does, the fumbles tend to come out more because, you get 12 rushes into a game and you're getting hit by Nick Bolton or whoever it might be. You tend to cough up the ball. So I don't know. I'm not trying to be that negative on the Bears, but it's just like they haven't given me anything to latch on to. They just haven't. I can't believe I'm taking 13.5 point spread in week 3, but here we are, and I'm doing it. Okay.
With all of that, I was just looking at some props for this game. You mentioned Justin Fields could break out as a runner. If there's one positive for this game for the Bears, his rushing attempts, it's over under at 9.5. I would take the over in that. Out of just sheer necessity of him scrambling and getting quarterback run plays, he might have to run for 10 plus times.
I like that. I do like that because it's just I don't see them getting it done any other way. Now, look, DJ Moore got into the game last week, but
did you see the clip of Devin White for the Bucks?
I don't
where he
think
was saying
so.
to DJ Moore, he was like, "I miss tackling you. They don't use you right over there." just to add a little bit more to this week.
Yeah. Well, on to the second biggest spread of the week. We have the Dallas Cowboys going to visit the Arizona Cardinals, minus 12.5, which is actually funny because this really must be the week of me just taking massive spreads. The Cowboys are a better team from back to front than the Chiefs are right now. Look, man, putting Patrick Mahomes aside, they have a more dynamic offense and probably a more well-rounded defense. Now, losing Trevon Diggs sucks. That sucks because that's a big part of what they do. But the Cardinals they're bad. They're just outright bad. They're not a team with a rookie quarterback who you're like, oh, well, he might go off any single week. We'll see. They're outright bad. And so it's actually funny that they have a smaller spread. Now, I know they're not playing at home, the Cowboys, whereas the Chiefs are, but they have a smaller spread than the Chiefs versus the Bears, which is nuts because Cardinals are like making really – now they're playing hard. They're making an effort to win on game day, but they did not make an effort to win in the offseason, right? Which was what sets you up. So for a team that's not trying to win versus a team that's actually good, it's crazy that spread is smaller. So what do you think, Bryson?
I'm going to take the Cowboys to cover this one. This number is just insane to me. They've outscored their opponents 70-10 to start this season. That's just absurd. Now, the Cardinals, to their credit, they've covered both games they've played so far. They covered against the Commanders and the Giants. Now, this is the best team they've played so far easily. Also, just now realizing they're playing 3 straight NFC East teams to start the season. That's really interesting. But this Cowboys team, they blanketed the Giants. I can think they can do a similar thing to this Cardinals team. There's nothing for this Cardinals team that should threaten the Cowboys, even with Trayvon Diggs out. That pass rush, Joshua Dobbs might spend more time on the ground than he does on his feet. Like, it's going to be a rough showing for him. This Cowboys offense, it's really funny. They haven't had to do anything. This Cowboys defense has just put them in such good positions to score in such short fields, and they've held their opponents to 0 points for so long that this Cowboys offense just hasn't had to do anything. So I think it's going to be a pretty similar situation. This defense is going to make life so difficult on Joshua Dobbs and this Cardinals offense. I don't see a way the Cardinals can threaten this Cowboys team. So again, don't love big spreads, but I'm going to take the Cowboys to cover here because there's like the Bears. I don't see any way they can stay in this game.
Yeah. Oh, would you have something to add, Max, or it's like
no? I'm just like looking and internalizing just like the matchup here.
Yeah,
my face is giving away my thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like Bryson's right. As like there's no reason why you should take the Cardinals. So it's like you're either taking the Cowboys or you're just staying away from the game altogether. I'm on the Cowboys at minus 12.5 here. Again, aside from the San Francisco 49ers, the Cowboys have looked like the best team in the NFL so far this season. I don't think that's any question. It's like the Cowboys defense looks really good. They are so good on the pass rush, and obviously the loss of Trayvon Diggs is going to hurt them in the long run. But I don't think it's going to matter that much in a game against the Cardinals because again, Josh Dobbs isn't going to have a lot of time to throw the ball to any target outside of his first read. So I think if you're going to be on the game, the Cowboys is minus 12.5. I would also add the Chiefs right now on DraftKings is 12.5. So you could technically do a 6-point teaser with the Cowboys and the Chiefs, get the number down to 6.5. And I think we all feel confident that both those teams are going to win by at least a touchdown. So if you want to try to get within that 7-point number, you can do that right now on DraftKings.
Fear Micah Parsons. That's all I have to say. He is a monster. He's playing incredibly well. Yeah, I already regret not picking him as my preseason selection for Defensive Player of the Year. He is insanely good. Nothing is going to stop him from that award this year outside of injury. And right now, he's looking pretty healthy. So, yeah, Cowboys, 12.5. That's all I have to say. Most of the time, I was just going to say, most of the time, it doesn't matter. One player doesn't make the difference, especially defensively. He does. Mm-hmm. He does. Right now, he does. Against the Cardinals, yes.
What's funny about the Micah Parsons thing you're talking about, I was looking at the props, and Vegas is so smart. They put his over on sacks at 0.25, so he needs half a sack, but it's at minus 250. So like, yeah, you can make the bet if you want to, but you're gonna have to give a lot of money to make like pennies. So I think that's hilarious. To put it at minus 250 for half a sack is just the funniest bet to me.
All right, guys, let's pick Sunday Night Football because I need to go lay down a little bit. The Steelers are going to visit the Raiders. You know what's funny? I was like thinking about next week. I was like, man, the Jets are going to be playing the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. It's not maybe not the greatest matchup these days, but with all of the good matchups that they've been giving Thursday Night Football, now that Prime has that game, we don't have the guaranteed best game on Sunday Night Football anymore. And so I'm curious to see how that looks as the season progresses. Steelers, Raiders, at least it should be close. Only 1.5-point favorites for the Raiders at home. And both teams are pretty healthy with Tyree Wilson possibly not playing, but due to illness. So with another day, more than 24 hours, he might be able to go for the Raiders. So team's healthy. Both teams not coming off great performances over their first 2 weeks. Fortunately, the Raiders did win one game, but this is, 1-3 between the two of them. I'm not going to set you up any more than that, Bryson. What do you think about the Raiders hosting the Steelers on Sunday night?
So this is actually probably one of my favorite bets of the week. I have the Steelers covering this one. They're my favorite underdog this week. I think they're just going to win this game outright. That defense for the Steelers is so good. It's incredible. They put up 14 points last week on their defense alone. I think they're going to do a pretty similar thing to this one. I think it's kind of funny though. This is going to be the first time this season that Jimmy Garoppolo gets sacked because he hasn't been sacked in either of the first two games. So I think it's fascinating. They're going to get to Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's really when Jimmy Garoppolo makes his most mistakes, is when he starts getting pressured, especially if you can get to him up front. Like the edges are going to do their thing, but if you can pressure Jimmy Garoppolo in his face, he's going to throw a bad ball that gets intercepted at some point in this game. And while neither offense is particularly good so far this season, I think that there's enough playmakers for Pittsburgh in this one to make enough big plays to put them in positions to score. And I find it very hard to see the Raiders making any kind of drives against the Steelers defense. They can't run the football. I think it's fascinating. Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing last year, can't get anything going. I think a lot of that is their Raiders offensive line is not equipped to run the ball very well. Jimmy Garoppolo has been not great. He has the same number of touchdowns and interceptions, so he's not been great. Devontae Adams has really been the only real threat in the passing game for the Raiders. And I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have much time to stand back there and pick his spots like Jimmy Garoppolo can do if he can stay on his feet. And TJ Watt's going to have a monster game. Highsmith could get a sack in this game. They're going to force at least one turnover in this one. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I think that plays into Pittsburgh's favor. And so I think the Steelers are going to cover the spread solely on that defense.
Yeah, I'm happy to take the Steelers as an underdog here. Look, I'm really happy they're an underdog because that makes the odds better, and I get free points on the better on the team that's the better team here. Look, I don't necessarily believe the Steelers' offense is as bad as it looks. That's just by virtue of they had to play the 49ers and the Cleveland Browns to begin the season. Those are two really good defenses. The Raiders are not that caliber of defense. So I imagine things are going to open up a little bit more than you would have seen in the first two games for the Steelers against the Raiders tomorrow. So I would take the Steelers plus 1.5 here. It's as simple as I think the Steelers are the better team here. I don't see anything where the Raiders are going to threaten outside of just force feeding Devontae Adams. And even then, that's not a guarantee because the Steelers are going to get to Jimmy Garoppolo tomorrow. So I would take Steelers. It's actually moving the way of the Raiders because on DraftKings it's 2.5 right now. So again, you may still be able to wait and keep on getting the better number. So I would take the Steelers here. In terms of just a prop I was looking at, Jaylen Warren's over under for rushing yards is at 28.5. They're basically splitting time between him and Najee Harris right now. So I think I could see Warren getting to at least 30 rushing yards against the Raiders tomorrow. So Steelers plus 1.5, and if you can get better, get it better.
Warren is the more explosive player of the two, so he might end up just being more effective ultimately as the season goes on. So we'll kind of see how long they commit to Najee Harris. So after basically feeling forced to select the heavy favorite in 5 straight games, I can finally choose an underdog again. And honestly, you know how I said fear Micah Parsons? Well, it's not as singular in the player, but fear TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Alex Highsmith. This game is not going to go well for the Raiders. I don't believe so. And I don't really love the Steelers' offense against the Raiders' defense, but you realize that the Steelers scored 2 defensive touchdowns last week. I mean, yeah, it's kind of fluky, but that's how good they are. They take the ball away and they make plays. And maybe it's not Alex Highsmith's chance to score. Maybe it's not TJ Watt's chance to score this week. But maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick gets a pick six. Maybe they force a fumble, take it back. So I just feel confident in the Steelers taking this game. What's funny is I actually kind of forgot that they won that game last week. I forgot the Steelers are 1-1.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I'm gonna take the Steelers 100%. Plus 1.5, plus 2.5. Don't care if they are underdogs. I'm taking them, and that's that. All right, that does it for week 3 of the Defiant Takes Football Show weekly picks show. Yeah, I need to go lay down. Appreciate you all for joining me. Now, this will be the time going forward, 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. But that also means that you'll be able to actually get our picks show on the podcast feed as well. Whereas most of the time we do it so close to game time, there's really no reason to put it out because it would be live for all of 20 minutes before games start. Now you actually have a good 24 hours to absorb, listen. So if you don't catch us live, you can still get our takes. Thanks, Bryson. Bryson is at Brison Owens 16 on Twitter. Kyle is at Kyle_Nishida. And always big thanks to our producer, Noah Ashley at Noah Ashtray Sports. You can find me at TheMaxDean. You can also find Defiant Takes Football at Defiant Takes FB. And of course, our written work over at DefiantTakesFootball.com. Another week of picks in the books and a little bit longer until we get to watch NFL football. I know most people are like about to just dive into a full day of college football, and I wish I could. I can't. I just don't have the time for that. So just gonna take a little nap and get ready for Saturday coming, and then back to the NFL grind. Can't wait, guys. We'll see you all next week.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.